I met Gus Castellanos through this meeting that we sometimes attend on Sundays with a dear teacher of us. And what caught my attention was not only what he shared in these meetings, but also one day I saw a posting on Facebook and who says, the war on drugs is the war on us. And that really resonates to my heart completely after me working with the Colombian government for many years about illegal harvesting and the impacted indigenous communities. And we as researchers, social researchers, saying the government, drug is not the enemy. The war is bad for the environment, for the people, for the community, for the economy, for the psychological well-being of people. The war is not on the drugs. So, Gus, would you like to tell me a little bit more about that?
But let me start by saying I'm by no means an expert. I have a personal experience being a drug addict and in long-term recovery now, thankfully. So I have been around people in recovery, people trying to get clean and sober, and I also have an experience with the prison system, where I do continue to take, until the pandemic, of course, mindfulness into the prison and seeing the effects of the so-called, in the United States anyway, the war on drugs, which I'm going to guess that war on drugs in the United States also impacted the Colombians and that for sure. So 100 years ago or so is from what I understand that the very conservative type in certain parts of the society, particularly the government, started to single out to make things like heroin associated with the African American and the indigent and the people that they didn't like, which of course was also part of what happened in the 80s with the crack, as opposed to what happened with with the opiates in the last 10 years. So you can see the theme that it's partly motivated by race for sure. And then Nixon, of course, started the whole so-called war on drug campaign and funding and all of that. But I usually show a graph that correlates directly the rising amount of people in prisons in the United States going exactly at timing with the war on drugs campaign. So, and it's true, the majority of people in prison have some kind of drug-related issue. I had these so-called addiction tendencies, if you will, because I started drinking and smoking pot when I was 13 years old. And this was the 60s, and so it was wanting to look up to those radical hippies that were doing things. But it was really mostly partying. And in the 70s with the discos in Miami and the club scene and cocaine and quaaludes and all of that. And then what happened in the 80s, so I graduated medical school in 1980, started raising my family and started my medical career. I mean, I thought my problem was with cocaine because, and you know how it was very popular in the 80s, at least in the States, and so which then led to the crack epidemic that started. But I wasn't doing cocaine. I would do cocaine, a lot of cocaine, but it was only every 2 or 3 months. So while I knew that was wrong and I knew I had a problem, I didn't think I was, quote, a formal addict at that point. But it was bad enough to say I should have got help. But when I stopped the cocaine in the early 90s, I was again restless and just not feeling right. And then the problems with the healthcare system started to affect me, the so-called job-related stress, and eventually what was now known as burnout. So we didn't call it that. There was not that much awareness. There certainly weren't people saying we've got all these programs for physician wellness and this and that, even though it was pretty obvious that it was happening. So I started to do what I thought was the right thing to do, which was, well, partly I actually what I thought was that, like a lot of doctors, I had to work harder to fix this. So I went to work, it burned me out, and I said, I got to fix this. I'm going back and doing more work. And I worked harder, which of course, more exhaustion, more burnout. I started sampling the prescription pills that I got in the office free. So I was practicing neurology and sleep medicine. And if you know anything about neurology and sleep medicine, the pills that we use are all the so-called goodies, that any addict would love. Barbiturates, the benzodiazepines like Valium and Xanax, um, stimulants, um, and then eventually the opiates. But we had them all. Sleeping pills like Ambien. That was something I got a whole bunch of.
So
So I would
Gus,
start.
they make you sleep, they make you sleep better, and they make you feel better, and they make you feel like nothing matters. What's the sensation with these pills? Why is people loving them so much?
Well, remember they come out. These are You said that wisely. These are prescription pills that have been tested and this and that through rigorous tests, and they find okay, this sleeping pill helps people sleep, and they feel better because they've gotten better sleep, at least for the short term use. And the same thing, pills like Xanax and Valium, they're people nervous and stressed and anxious and helps you calm down so you can function better, again, for the short term. And the same thing with the painkillers. You're in pain, you went to surgery, you had an operation, take the painkillers for a few days, they pull your teeth, take some Percocet, as they call it, for a few days, and then stop it. So they have uses and they were well studied and they're relatively safe. But I would get them in the office for free and as much as I wanted to a point. And, so I just, like a lot of doctors, by the way, I'm not saying anything that's a surprise to people. And so I just started using them and they are habit forming. And so not only, psychologically dependent, like, hey, this is nothing, just take a pill, go to sleep, wake up. But I becoming more and more physically dependent.
Yeah.
And I could feel the little withdrawing in the mornings when I wouldn't, take because I didn't take the pills during the day, and hardly it wasn't even every night, but it was more than I should have. So I did that for a few years, and then the burnout was still going on. That's the other thing. Taking those pills or anything you might do does not get rid of the problem.
Mm.
The problem is still there. You got to confront the problem, and so that was what was missing. So it
So
was
it was
starting
like
to.
an anesthesia, like it was like an anesthesia in a way, like you were drinking these pills and the whole world was looking good, but inside was very turbulent because your wife told you, based on what I heard, that hey, Gus, there's something here happening. Let's do something. And she was doing yoga, and you
Yeah.
start doing yoga, and then in 1998 you start the MBSR because a friend of yours that brought the MBSR to the university invited you. And after 5 years of you starting this program was when you really embrace
Yeah.
the practice.
Well, I took the course again the second time, and
The
yeah, it
second.
was my wife's doing, and she was doing to take care of herself yoga, and so she kept bothering me, and I said, I know what I'm doing. I'm a doctor, which I didn't, but that's how it got me to the mindfulness in 1998, and it did okay for a little bit, but then I stopped practicing. Things got really bad, and then I took the course again a few years later, and then things got really good. That's when
things
everything.
things are really bad because you continue with the opioids and the sleep medicine that you were giving to your patients. You were giving it to yourself,
Right.
and yeah.
Right.
Mm.
Right. Eventually, the sampling of the opiates went away, and so I had to start write prescriptions for myself, which is illegal. Obviously, I can't write a prescription for opiates, a controlled narcotic, and feed myself with it. So that caused a lot of shame and guilt and anxiety, which of course got me to using more because that was the relief, the instant relief. And you're right about it. You can call it an anesthesia. For me, it was more like an escape. I could escape my life for that moment and feel that way. So,
Mhm.
but the opiates, as you know from what you hear out there, so these are the same substances that are contained in heroin and that so-called fentanyl and those derivatives that are killing people from overdoses. So same class of drugs, the prescription pills. I thought this is how smart I was. I'm not going to do crack cocaine because that's addicting. I'll just use powder cocaine. I'm not going to do heroin because that's for addicts. I'm just going to pop 100 pills a day.
Wow.
So, this is not really good thinking.
No,
But yeah,
it's the thinking of the ego of the doctor, perhaps, in that at that time that you say, I can handle this, I know what I'm doing, I prescribe this medicine, I can handle this.
lack of self-awareness,
Lack of self.
denial, rationalization, and then if you want, because you're kind of looping it around the war on drugs, and the opioid crisis. At that point, and it was in '97 that the OxyContin pill came out. And there was a tremendous campaign by the company, Purdue Pharma, the pharmaceutical company that made it, to come to us and tell us that OxyContin was not addicting. You don't know how many times I heard this woman, and she was a nice person. She would be in my office every week. OxyContin not addicting. It's not addicting because it's like this. It has this. It's this. Yeah, but it's the same opiate as this and that. He goes, yeah, but we did this to it, so it's not addicting. Don't worry, it's not addicting. And year after year, they kept saying that. So I know, I knew better, and I knew that was wrong. But yeah, I'm hearing it. It says, hey, OxyContin not addicting, not addicting. You might as well take it, and this and that. And then meanwhile, within a few years, we start seeing the overdoses here in Florida. That opioid crisis started in the year of 2000. It didn't start like 10 years ago, like you hear in the news. I mean, it was going on. I remember young kids overdosing, taking care of them in the hospital. And here I
Yes.
am with my problem, and I'm walking into the intensive care unit in a brain dead teenager, young adult that took too much of this OxyContin. So yeah, but you know what? They grip you, and if you're not getting help, if you this is something we can't do on our own. We need the help, the support.
Yes, and what is the limit? Because I have heard psychiatric doctors, friends of mine, when I asked them, because I'm not a doctor, when I asked them about these drugs that we're prescribing or giving to the children because of ADD or anxiety or depression, they explained to me that it's like putting a fertilizer into a plant. You need to put certain fertilizer for the plant to grow. So that's how they manage these imbalances in the brain, chemical imbalances. So it becomes a habit without awareness whatsoever.
I don't work with kids, teenagers, except in a summer camp. I do work with a neighborhood in Miami that's under resourced and stuff like that, and we have a summer camp, and I teach mindfulness. Of course, they're not on drugs there, but they're exposed to them. Most of the kids have a parent or two in prison or in substance use problems, mental health problems, or foster kids. So they're very rewarding, demanding but rewarding at the same time. When you say what's the limit, that's the dilemma. There is no specific number. It mostly boils down to the individual's life, I guess, that says if you can't stop without consequences, without craving, without withdrawal, you may be addicted. Or particularly if you continue to use these drugs in spite of consequences, then you can be say that you have the so-called disease of addiction. But yeah, a lot of the kids that get those stimulants for ADD and stuff, you wonder sometimes who's getting treated there, the parent, the school teacher, or the kid. So, well, yeah, so to be clear, I don't actually work with them directly, but I do work with their parents. There's the two types, the ones that are totally clueless. They just don't know. I don't want to say they're faulty. They're not. They bought into the fact of, first of all, you said it, chemical imbalance of the brain sounds very good, but that term was not a medical term. That was a marketing term by the pharmaceutical companies. It began when Prozac came out to say to people, because mental health stigma, nobody wanted to get treated, whatever, says, hey, it's not depression, it's a chemical imbalance in the brain, and we have a chemical that helps you. So it became everybody, oh, chemical imbalance. It's you're okay. It's a chemical imbalance. Take the pill. So again, we hear it, we've got sold on it, we're not aware that where it's coming from, and we fall right into that trap. And so some of the parents were just really didn't know. So you had to kind of slow them down, make them aware, and get them to get informed. I never tell them, don't do this, don't do that. Not my role.
Yes.
But then there are the other ones where really it's a sad case that the kids are abusing the drugs and they don't know what to do. They're getting in trouble. They're dropping out of school. They're in the going to jail, and the parents are anything they do. It's just not helping. The kid keeps going because the addiction disease now grips them, and it's really hard to get to lose that. It's just hard to get off the drug. But if the mother or the father is not on board and taking care of themselves, it's not going to be helpful for the kid.
Yes, they
So
absorb
that
everything they see from their parents. Absolutely, it's like it's their role models. You know, the teachers, the parents, uh, adults around, and even friends. So if I do it, it's okay. My parents do it, it's fine. I found the opioids in the drawer in the nightstand because my mom has to have pills to go to sleep. So I better take one and see what happened. So it's
that's right.
it's a
That's right.
cycle of behavior, correct?
Yeah,
Because,
correct.
oh my God, it's a lot of suffering there we see because this sometimes leads to suicidal behavior. And I was reading at the World Health Organization that 800,000 die due to suicide each year, and one person every 40 seconds
Mm.
commits suicide. And in 2019, suicide was the second leading cause of death among children and adolescents ages 13 and 19.
Yeah. And by the way, some of the kids, because I'll tell you from my experience,
Yes,
but also from what I when I hear from people, because remember when I'm dealing with the people in recovery, they may be an adult, they may be 30, 40 years old when they come in, but they started with problems as teenagers, so we
yes,
know that story, and their adverse childhood experiences. But a lot of us were self-medicating. We wanted to escape. We wanted to feel better. We wanted to anesthetize, just like you said. And the same thing with a lot of these teenagers. They get bullied, they get picked on in social media, they feel this way and that way. And it's easy to take that pill and then, go down into that path and get support by the wrong people.
yes,
And of course, not the least of which will be a drug dealer who will start prompting you and getting you and the friends that then can tell you how to steal from your grandmother so you can buy your drugs or get the drugs from them.
yes.
So
Yeah, there. If you want to find a way, you'll find a way to get the drugs. Yes, it happened also to me. I used to be a marijuana smoker, and I smoke tobacco as well. And to be able to get rid of that addiction, I have to totally surrender into yoga. That
yeah,
was my salvation. And but how about you?
when I was writing the prescriptions for myself, I came to a pharmacist who saw me writing the prescriptions, which of course is illegal. But then he instead started giving me the pills. He said, here, just take it. If you need some more, come back. And I was like, okay,
Like
that's
free
real
candy, like free candy.
in a candy store. Yep. And it was like I was using the pills 2 or 3 times a week, and not too much for sure. Not really healthy. But then at that point, it just got out of control. Out of control because I could call him up at any time for the next 2 years at 2 o'clock in the morning, on Friday night, Monday morning. And he would come to the pharmacy, meet me, and say, "Well, what do you want?" And at that point, it became just the opioids, just the
Well,
opioids.
Gusta,
So
since you say two in the morning is because you were not able to sleep. So what you were taking was not helping you
no,
anymore.
no, no. I was running out. It wasn't that it was helping. It was I would just keep taking more and more, and then I would run out, and I would just say, say, so was, whenever I needed him, when I was running out, he was there, and that was, of course, not normal. You don't have a pharmacist say, "Okay, I'll meet you there and let me give you some free narcotics."
Yes.
But when you're so impaired and so caught up in, um, and again, this was like 2000, 2001, 2002. The opioid crisis hadn't made the news yet. People knew about drug addiction and knew things could be, but nothing like this. And I wasn't aware that, whatever, but I could tell, I was way down the path. But in a sense, that really ramped me up so that in 2 years, so in those 2 years is when I took the mindfulness again and started doing the yoga regularly. And that's when I finally had enough self awareness. I said to myself, I need to detox myself.
Yes.
But that's not something I would recommend. You need help professionally. You should go to a doctor and get detox. You don't do it on your own. As brilliant as you think you are, that's wrong. So
Yes.
in the detoxing thing, I ended up overdosing. So officially, I'm an opioid overdose survivor. And I say that because so many people hear about the opioid overdose and the dying, and so many people dying, and more people
Yes,
died during the pandemic, and it's like this. But you also have to understand, many of us do survive and do okay. We want to get that message out there,
yes,
not
absolutely.
to be not to get praised, not to be oh what a great guy. No, on the
No, of
contrary.
course, Gus, you are a great guy. Not everybody can tell
Well,
your story and be alive and be
well,
aware.
thank you for that. But it's just more to send a message, especially those that are struggling. You can get better, even if you
Absolutely.
had an overdose. So what happened was I ended up in the hospital I worked at, and
Mm.
when I woke up from the overdose, of course, I said I surrendered. Like you said, I surrendered into like whatever you want me to do, whoever. And they said go to treatment, and that was actually 17 years ago. So I went to treatment. I got into a recovery program, and I've been clean and sober ever since. But then the FBI caught the pharmacist. What he was doing was when he was giving me all those drugs, I thought he was being a nice guy. He was using my medical license to commit insurance fraud to the tune of $2 million. So FBI is big on fraud, health insurance fraud. So they wanted to make a big case out of this, and there were six of us in the case. They took us all down, said you have to go to prison, which I cooperated with them, took a deal, and they promised they would be good to me. And the Department of Justice was good to me. It was the judge who decided, I don't care about you. You're a doctor. You should know better. You go to prison, lose your license, and by the way, pay the money back that I had nothing to do with.
Oh,
Yeah. So of course, I didn't have $2 million at the time, nor have I. But it's just part of the. That's what I got stuck with. But
absolutely.
by then, I had been doing mindfulness, and I was doing an hour of yoga 6 days a week, and meditating, usually body scan type meditations for 30 to 40 minutes a day. And when I walked into prison, I was fairly, I don't want to say happy, but I was more calm than I thought I should be. I
Yes.
was more in that sense of I know what to do in this moment as I'm walking in. It's just this moment, this is the moment. And I don't know what's going to happen in the future, all the stuff that happened in the past, but here right now, I'm okay. I'm literally okay. I'm walking, I'm alive, I'm doing this. And of course, all kinds of crazy stuff that happens in prison, you walk through that. But what I ended up doing was, especially at the beginning, I didn't know what else to do, was meditating. And I figured out ways to do yoga even in a cell because we were locked up in a cell for 15, 16, 18 hours a day. And so you're in a cell with another person, with a toilet, with a sink, with a bunk bed, putting something on the floor to do something, do some postures in the bed, as well as body scan after body scan after body scan. And that's how I got started. And I ran into other meditators. I spent 2 years in prison, and I end up calling it my razor wire retreat because I did an hour of yoga a day and 4 or 5 hours of meditation a day. Mindfulness, it was our little meditation sangha, but we didn't know I don't want to say we didn't know what we were doing. We each had our own experience. So some came from the Hindu yoga tradition, used that kind of meditation. So there was some chanting, those Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Yeah, all
So and then one
the
guy would sing
mantras.
it.
Uh-huh.
Right, and then we would repeat it.
Yeah.
Then I would lead body scans, and then some other guy was a Nichurian Buddhist. But that was it, and we would just be doing it back and forth. And I can tell you, I really felt the 6 months that we meditated every day, every day, 8 to 9 p.m., Monday through Sunday, that something happened in the camp. Everybody was a little calmer. There was less craziness. The warden wasn't such a bad person. The guards were calmer. And then we had to split because people were being released and being transferred and stuff. And then things started ramping up. So I'm not going to say because we meditated, but you never know. I really felt that the time we spent together may have had an influence on the rest of the camp. So I didn't know what I was going to do when I got out, by the way. Obviously, I had no medical license and no train. I never worked a day in my life except for a doctor. So I
Yes.
can't be a doctor anymore. What am I going to do? And it never occurred to me to be teaching this stuff. I had no intention. And so I walk out, I get introduced to somebody who is connected with John Kabat-Zinn, was on at the Center for Mindfulness at University of Massachusetts, and she lives here locally. And she said, "Let's go. They'll help you get trained. I will have some people here. We're going to go to these places and these places and start teaching mindfulness." And that's what happened in 2009. And ever since then, I've been teaching mindfulness.
Wow, Gus. And how rich is your testimony? Because people think that we, as yoga instructors and mindfulness teachers, we're happy and so tranquil and so calm every time, and they don't know what's behind our story because we came to these teachings for a reason.
What I miss the most, by the way, is the prison thing. These guys were really, really good in prison. And, I know what it
Um,
feels like, and I know how appreciative it is to have people from the outside because you're kind of seeing the same people every day, of course, and
yes,
it's nice to have
yes.
visitors, but they really took the mindfulness on. In fact, so we started in 2011, ran a modified MBSR course, and then we repeated that in 2017 for the new group. But the rest of the time, we meet twice a month. They pretty much run the show. This one will read a body scan. This one will read some poetry or a reading from a book. This one does some yoga or some qigong. And so, we're just there to guide them and to enjoy with that being with them and make sure they don't go way off track. But they've really took it on, and they find it very useful. It's not because it's something to get away from the rest of the place. They really do benefit. You can hear their stories, even hearing it from, for instance, the doctor who says, hey, those guys in mindfulness, they're not coming in here with the shenanigans. They're not manipulating me. They're really doing their thing. They're not as sick. Their diabetes is under better control. And some of them will say, and my family, when I'm on the phone calls and when the visits, when they come to visit, they say, well, hey, something's going on. What's happening? So real rewarding.
Wow, Gus, thank you so much for all this information and also this sharing from the heart that you always do. One last question, Gus. What would you tell someone that is in a very deep stage of anxiety and depression right now, not only because of the pandemic situation, but also in their lives? What would you recommend to this person if this person allows you to recommend something?
I don't have one simple answer. I think the most consistent thing though is to be aware of how you're feeling and know that there is hope, because it's that hopelessness and helplessness that keeps us from moving along. I don't think this will ever, not me. Everybody else can get better. I can't. This is too much. And I don't know what I'm going to feel like if I let go of my misery. Deep down inside, that's what sparks us to move when we hit that bottom, that sense of hopelessness, which paradoxically begins for so many of us with surrendering. I surrender because I've given up all hope of me doing anything, but know that there is hope. And then the practical step is to reach out to a healthy person, of course, not back to your drug dealer or somebody, whatever, but to really, really ask for help. That making the step to ask for help is enough, whether the other person responds or not. So
Cause, and how about the doctors or the parents that really believe that these drugs are gonna make chemical balance in their children's or in their own brains? What would you say to them?
well, I think I'm not opposed to the drugs. They're useful, like I said, if you need a Xanax or if you need the stimulant for ADD in a teenager to help them focus. That may be useful, but not alone. That's not the way to treat it. You now need to have something else, whether it's psychotherapy, behavioral therapy, or things like mindfulness or yoga or those kinds of techniques, exercising, something else besides just the pill. The pill may be necessary to get you over the hump, but you really should be doing something else. And also, I used to tell my patients this even before all my trouble. I did this all the time. I'm giving you the sleeping pill because you're having problems with this anxiety pill, this pain pill. But every time you come back, we're going to just talk about whether you still need it. Because too many doctors do that. Okay, how's it going? Everything's good, no side effects. Here's another prescription. Oh, you're sleeping well, no side effect. Here's another prescription. And before you know it, 2 years later, that person is physically dependent. So the same thing happens with some of these kids. Kids doing okay in school. You're happy, mom. Okay, mom. Here's some more Ritalin. Here's some more Adderall.
Yes.
Without going through, we need to stop, see what it looks like. Let's get them off. Let's try behavioral therapy. Let's try this mindfulness.
And how do you sleep now?
Oh, listen. After I slept for 2 years in prison, I could sleep anywhere. So Actually, I wasn't that bad of a sleeper. What happened was the sleeping got messed up more because I was using these other drugs. So it was the drugs that caused poor sleep. Because when you're a medical student and an intern, you learn to sleep wherever you can because you never know when you're going to sleep again when you're on call so much. But my sleep was never really that much of a problem. However, again, I don't know if I'm going to sleep. Let me just pop the pill. It's not addicting. It's not addicting. Let me just take another pill and I'm fine and whatever. So I sleep well, thanks.
Wonderful. What technique do you use from the mindfulness tradition, let's say, teachings to get better sleep from your experience?
Well, in the general public, like the from back in '98, I could see the body scan has always been the go-to practice for people with insomnia. But it doesn't work for everybody. So of course the focused attention, breath awareness. But if you said I say this a lot when I'm giving just a lecture. If you want to do one practice, if you have an insomnia, do the body scan at the beginning of the night or in the middle of the night if you wake up, if that's your problem. That seems to be the better one. And then I always say, try that. And if it doesn't work, then you can call me or do something else. But yeah.
Wonderful, because I agree with you. I actually use the body scan a lot when I don't feel like I can fall asleep that fast. And as John Kabat-Zinn said, it's not about falling asleep, it's falling awake.
Yeah.
So that's the whole, I wouldn't say magic, but the whole gift that this mindfulness will give us as teachers, as practitioners, as curious person that want to lead this path away from drugs and away from war, not only to drugs, but inside ourselves, because there is a war inside ourselves that we are putting to sleep with a lot of drugs. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that was so beautifully said. That we have the war that's inside of us. Until we find peace and make peace with ourselves, it's going to be hard to transmit peace to the world. As you know, those people that say you want to start peace, you want to see peace in the world, start with yourself. But you're right, the war inside of us that we're fighting. And again, this is where I find the mindfulness so useful. It has to start with being aware that that's happening. If you're not aware you're fighting with yourself and having a war going on inside yourself, you're never going to know how to get better.
Identify the issue and then recognize it and then surrender and act upon with the help of the community, which offers a lot of help. And sometimes it's not our parents, it's not our family, it's not our teacher, but it's a professional that is out there ready to help us. And we can reach out to them. And in the United States, we have that resources and many places in the world. So there is hope, as you beautifully said. And thank you, Gus, very much for your time, your energy, your teachings, your sincere heart, your open mind, and thank you also to your wife for giving you the ultimatum. You better get well, and for your path that is an example for many of us that sometimes feel like we don't want to continue life because it's too difficult. It's so much suffering.
Yeah, thank you, Sophia. This is so beautifully stated and all of that about how you are worth taken care of and it's worth living, even if it's just to be an example of it can be done. So having that hope really is important. And thank you for your work and thank you for all you do.
Oh,
I
thank
really
you
appreciate
for
that.
your time. I learned that your name is Agustin.
Yeah.
That's great, like the same.
Yeah. No one's called me Saint Gus, believe me. I'm not Gus the Guru. No one's called me Gus Kabat-Zinn. But I have an FBI picture, so.